need another journal or would like one, let me know, and I will make sure that we get one for you. As you read the journal, we're asking you to ask the question, what is important to God? What is important to Jesus? What are you reading that has been doing that? This last week, one more thing. We're reading through things in chronological order. This is the order that the books were written in. So we're reading right now Matthew and Mark, and Luke, and John. So this last week, we're reading in the middle parts of these Gospels. Second into the third year of Jesus' ministry, somewhere in that time frame. This is some of the things that were in our reading this last week. Jesus healing a couple of blind men, casting out a mute spirit. Jesus appoints the 12, sends them out. King Herod is looking for Jesus, trying to figure out what's going on. Jesus feeds 5,000. John the Baptist was beheaded, but it's talked about in our reading. Jesus walks on water, and Peter, for a little while. Jesus does the teaching on I am the bread of life. Jesus has moved into kind of an area of contention with the Pharisees about how their traditions and how they use their traditions instead of looking at the Gospels or at the law. He cast out a demon near Tyre and Sidon. He feeds 4,000 people. Peter confesses that he sees that he is the Christ. There's the transfiguration. The apostles are arguing about who's the greatest, who's the best. And he does a bunch of teaching at the Feast of Booths. So that's kind of a quick rundown of those things. Question is, what stood out to you this week? What did you see? What do you want to talk about this morning? Yeah. Throughout this, and I think some of the reading this next week, you see the apostles saying that they're jockeying for position. Who's going to sit at the right hand? Who's got the best position? Who's in line for promotion?
Yeah, and then they get mad with James and John when the mother comes, and they say, well, how could you have the gall to do that?
Yeah. Wish we'd thought of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, when James and John's mother asked for, put my boys right up there with you, and that didn't go over so well with the rest of them. Yeah. What else? Dale?
This reading brought out to me an understanding I've not understood before. It's been more of a question. It's the man's son is has a seizure and cries out, and he oftentimes throws himself into the water or into a fire, and he's asked the disciples to heal him, and they're unable to do so, and so he turns to Jesus and asks him to do it, and Jesus says this very enigmatic statement: how long have I got to put up with you people? Or it's something on that order, and it's like I've never understood it. So
Okay.
it follows up later. Anyway, go ahead. I was asking my wife, what's this? He just says but it's connected below where he says to his disciples. I go, why is he You have to be able to cast out, demons and spirits, and he's saying, I've got a short amount of time. I'm going to be killed soon.
Okay, he just, yeah, in this deal that Dale is talking about, in this incident Dale is talking about, Jesus has just come off the Mount of Transfiguration with Peter, James, and John, where Luke says that off the Transfiguration, the disciples can't cast out this demon. Jesus does. There's an interesting interchange there, but Jesus' response is, how long do I have with you guys? How long do I have to put up, as you put it, how long do I have to put up with you? You're not there yet. And there's a lot. And part of what you were talking about is instead of being servants, they're jockeying for position. So, yeah, there's a lot going on throughout this when you read it all at once, isn't there? No. No.
I think that at this point, they still haven't got it.
Uh-huh.
They still don't know what kind of kingdom Jesus is talking about. They still have it in their heads that, hey, he's going to be this great leader. We're going to kick the Romans out. We're going to become the superpower, whatever, and we're going to rule there on earth.
Yeah, they're still looking at military Messiah.
Even though he's told them over and over.
Yeah, telling them something different, they're not hearing. Okay? What else stood out to you this week? Actually, I'm going to come back to this, I think, but yeah.
I don't think it answers the question of what does God want us to know. But it was this, we're reading across the Gospels, but the one that didn't this specific one that didn't appear in all of them, or three of them, was the story of the tax collector asking for the temple tax.
Oh, yeah.
That one doesn't appear in the others, but it appears in Matthew.
Uh-huh.
The tax collector.
Oh, I hadn't drawn that connection. Yeah, that's good. Dale was saying that where the people asked Peter for the temple tax, and Peter says, "Oh yeah, we pay it," and Jesus says, "Well, how? Who pays that tax? The children or the non-children?" Well, it's the non-children, and we are children. But so that you don't upset him, sends Peter to go fish for the tax. How many fishermen do we have in here? Fisher people? Not that many? A few? How many of you go out, throw in your hook, catch a fish, and you're done? I have a feeling that Peter went out, and we know that he at times fished all night and didn't catch anything. I'm wondering how long God let him sit there and wonder about his mouth that talks before his brain is engaged. I don't know. I don't know. But he catches a fish that has a coin in its mouth that he pays the tax. Interesting question. What else did you see?
I think there's an interesting passage that I think is just in Mark 9, kind of toward the end of it, 38, where they say, we saw somebody driving out demons in your name, but he's not with us. And I think, man, that's like us. Well, I'm not sure that's a real miracle because they're not following Christ the way we're following Christ. And then Jesus has a really interesting response that as long as he's doing it in my name, he can't say anything bad about us. And he goes on and says, if you give it a cup of water in my name, that it's, to be recognized. But it makes me think about, the importance of that God wants us to be maybe more open. If people are doing things in Jesus' name, then we should be celebrating that.
Yeah, and you tie that in with what Brett was bringing up, that they're arguing for position. This guy isn't in our in our column. And there's also a lot of people that are opposing and saying bad things. So, you know, if this guy's at least doing good things in our name, he's not going to talk bad about us tomorrow. What else stood out to you? I'm surprised there's only, in all the reading that you've done, we've talked about, well, that's in Matthew, and this is in Mark, and this is there. This last week, we read one thing that is the only miracle in all four Gospels.
And with that, actually, on the feeding of the 5,000, which is, I think, where you're going with that. Yeah. But the feeding of the 5,000 in all four, what's really interesting to me with the feeding of the 5,000, I realized this fairly recently, is that even though it's a little different in all four, the feeding of the 5,000 and walking on water we have listed as different things up there, but it's really appears to be all part of a greater narrative that's in all four in that exact order. Specifically, it mentions, even John, which is so different, mentions feeding of the 5,000, into walking on water, into crossing on the other side and Jesus preaching. Like, there's that part in all three of them, if slightly different in each. But
Yeah. The walking on water is not in all four of them, but
it isn't?
it is. No, but it talks about they got over to the other side. Okay. So, but yeah, John?
And again, each one of these writers is writing the gospel story, the story of Jesus. They're writing a biography of the gospel biography to a different audience many years later. So it's not like they said, okay, so Jesus was born, and then he did this, and then he did this, and then he did, I mean, they're thinking about, what do I want to write? What do I want them to know? So when we say, it kind of feels like there's this big meta-narrative going on. Yes, the writers are thinking about, what do I want to point out? What is it that the church needs to really hear of all the things that Jesus did? What do I want to say slightly different than Mark said? What do I want to say slightly different than Matthew said? You know, to round out this story. And I think we still get trapped in the travel narrative. You know, he did this, and then he did this, and then he did this. These are gospels that are written, inspired, much later, trying to communicate something that's getting lost to the church.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Randy, you had something?
Well, what I was going to ask some questions about would be about the 5,000. Does anyone have a specific thought that when you read about the 5,000, before I start rattling off something? Any questions about it? Oh, where? Sorry.
Darren?
This whole arc in Matthew is Jesus' terrible, horrible, awful, no good, very bad day. He finds out that his cousin has been executed, which is, I think he knows that he's going to die. But John was beheaded for nothing, you know, and he tries to go away, takes a boat, get away, get out in the middle of nowhere, and all these people that are following him for the tricks and the fun and all that stuff, he's hoping that some of them are listening to him, but even though he's got this personal thing going on, he's trying to get out away from his own, pray about this and deal with it. 5,000 people walk so far away from town and have no sense of preparation that, you know, maybe we're going out into the desert and we're going to die if we don't get food. And then his apostles who have been following around for 2 years come to him and you know, Jesus is eminently practical. He says, we've got to feed these people. I mean, these people are literally sheep. They walked out into the wilderness, except they don't eat like sheep. We got to give them food. And he has to miraculously show them something that they've never thought about before. We're going to feed 5,000 people off of a tiny amount of food because God can do so much more than you can imagine. The next thing, he walks on water. He sends them over and, you know, it's like, I need to deal with this, okay? Just go on the other side, I'll meet you there. And they still don't understand. After having just seen this monster
shows their humanness.
Yeah.
Almost 2 full years. This is the 3rd year, and this is the year that things start to go haywire, because he was a novelty. That first year, with what he was doing, he was gathering, and then in the 2nd year, it kept growing. Now, the 3rd year, as he's getting ready to start, he's going to start teaching them, and they're going to have trouble understanding. Even the apostles are going to have, the 12 that will become the 11 that will become the apostles, are having a tough time understanding him. And you do ask the question, I've been with them, they've been with him this long, why? Why? We've witnessed a lot of things. Why have we not got there? That's a question.
God's timeline it's going to according to God's timeline, not to the readiness of the apostles. They are not the ones in charge by their belief or non-belief. It's God is in charge of the timeline of when the fulfillment and when his time to die. So that the apostles have to be ready. Does that make sense? That they're not the ones leading it. Their belief or non-belief isn't what's making it happen.
But it does cause them to ask, go ahead. It does cause them to ask questions and ask for explanations. And yet they're still, as we say, still learning as they ask those questions and as they experience all this. And yes, you can imagine what was going through their minds. I marvel at what they said when they were in the boat, when they said, who is this person? Who? I've seen him do this and this, but who is the person that just speaks and everything just levels out?
Well, there is an ongoing theme, I think, that I saw through the 2 of them, actually. One of them is the theme of the bread. Bread seems to come up a lot in this week's, the feeding of the 5,000, pick up 12 baskets. Feeding of 4,000, they pick up 7 baskets of leftovers. Imagine inviting people over and you've got a little bit of food and you have more leftovers than you started out with. It's a novel concept. But that's what happens. And Jesus talks about, I am the bread of life. Then you've got beware the leaven of the Pharisees, which the apostles don't get. They think, oh, we only brought one loaf with us. He goes, I don't know how you're going to put that on tape, but it's just, it's not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs when he's up in the area of Tyre and Sidon to the Syrophoenician woman. Which, Darren, I think it was you made the comment, Jesus has been having this awful day, and he tries to withdraw to the wilderness to pray, to get away. That actually happens 3 times in our reading this last week. That Jesus goes to withdraw, to take the apostles back, and what happens? A crowd of 5,000. Their rest gets interrupted by a Gentile woman whose daughter is possessed. And he goes, no. I can't take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. But her response, even the dogs eat the crumbs that come off the table. I think Jesus really appreciates that. She didn't argue with him about she's a dog. She says, yes, but I still want a crumb. And he heals her daughter. And he goes to the leaven of the Pharisees. And they're still tied up on, I know it's about supper time, and we've got a loaf of bread, but where did you buy that? Did you buy that from a Pharisee? you've got that theme going on. And that whole discussion in John 6 about the bread of life. Do you have something you want
Yeah,
to?
I was going to ask about that. He would use, and as we've said earlier, probably he didn't have a new set of teachings every time he spoke. So the apostles were with him all this time, and some of us would say, well, they should have picked up on some of it because he was going to follow some of the basic patterns. But when you look at the fact that they questioned why he did it, and when we talk about this leaven, first of all, let's just quickly determine, what does the leaven do? What does leaven do? All right. Yes, it does. It causes rising. Now, why would he take that example and then compare it to a Pharisee? Pharisees, plural. Leaven has an... Yes, go ahead.
Leaven was used throughout Scripture to represent sin.
And the bread that they used for their Passover was unleavened bread because of the circumstances of when they left.
Which is also called bread of haste.
And so it's kind of like it's almost symbolic of the Pharisees going away from what they had been taught instead of strictly holding to it. You know, that they supposed to be using unleavened, and instead they have become leavened.
Also, if you get the wrong leaven in the bread, it just ruins it. It ruins the bread. If you get the wrong leaven in the bread, I mean, not everything that makes the bread rise is good. Some of it will just make it spoil. Taste bad. It'll just have to be thrown out. So I sort of thought that's what he was talking about.
But
I think we had
go ahead.
one other
Sorry.
comment, or a couple other back over here.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
The boastfulness and the proudness of the Pharisees.
I can't hear him.
Boastfulness and proudness of the Pharisees is what Jesus was warning about. Jay, you had something?
Well, leaven's just a tiny thing, just a tiny bit. You compare it to the whole batch of dough that Jesus is saying. That one little thing can work its way into all of it, right? So be careful. Be careful what you let in. Be careful the teachings that you let in, because they can corrupt the whole thing.
I was going to say, who's our bakers here? Who bakes with leaven? Tell us how that works. What?
Makes it puffy.
Puffy. Just you drop it in and it's all of a sudden real puffy?
It's yeast, it's bacteria.
What? It takes time. How much time? Depends on what you're baking.
And you have to have something in there to feed the
You have to feed the yeast. I remember it used to be baked just north of downtown Oklahoma City, rainbow bread. And their advertising slogan when I was a kid was, it's the 8-hour loaf, which got people at work who were not very productive being called rainbow because they were an 8-hour loaf. But you know, you put a little bit in, and you knead it around, and you let it sit there, and you knead it around, and it spreads through the whole thing. It spreads. You know, now then you can bake some really good yeast rolls. Yeah, Bim.
Whether or not they had dried yeast at that point in time, or if it was more like sourdough, where you had a starter that you pulled the loaf out of and then added flour to that starter, because that's what leftovers have heat to create the living area for that.
Yeah, in the baking of sourdough, and you you take a little bit out and you put that and feed it, and it continues on. And yeah, I don't know. I'm not that familiar if they had the dry yeast that they would add in, but it's the same process. You just keep it and redo it. And Angie's baked some really good sourdough bread the last couple of months. So I watched that happen. I don't know how to do it, but I like the results.
When we go back and look at the feeding of the 5,000, and we look at what he had to work with and how he divided them out into the groups and so forth, and how that they went around and distributed. When you witness that, when the apostles, the disciples who later became apostles, saw this, and then those that were there. Now, this group of people that were following him out there were basically, I would say, pro-Jesus. They were very much interested in hearing him, what he said, asking questions. They were not a group that was trying to look for faults, although there was always some of those sprinkled in. But they went out basically for that they would want to learn from him, and yet they witnessed so many of these things because they did go in groups. And why would they witness something like this? To have seen, you know what it says, 5,000 men, so you can just kind of round up for how many women and children. So it was a huge thing. Why is it that they would witness this and then turn around and ask him for a sign? Why would they do that? What are they looking for?
They were looking for confirmation inside themselves because they were still unsure. He said, even if the dead raise, you still would not believe. Therefore, they were looking for the confirmation of something to say within themselves, am I doing the right thing by following? Am I doing right?
Okay.
They were looking for further confirmation.
Yes.
Am I doing right?
Yes.
It's kind of like the story of the guy who was on the roof and he kept asking God, please save me, like when the floodwaters came, a boat came by and he said, no thanks, I'm waiting for God to save me.
Oh.
And the helicopter comes. He says, no thanks, I'm waiting for God to save me. They have this idea in his mind that this is how God's going to save me. And they're not really looking at the reality that God just sent you a boat and a helicopter. Both the ways for God saved him, that he was looking for a very specific way in his mind.
And you have to remember, they're waiting for a physical kingdom, a ruler. So everything they see, they're trying to, well, this is interesting. I didn't think our ruler was going to be able to feed us. And, you know, they've got, it's incongruent in their mind with what they were expecting. John?
What? I'm sorry, John. I got to look around more.
Paul says we have everything for godly living. And yet we look at the world around us and we go, when's God going to fix this? And we're still doing the exact same thing today. You know, well, the church could have more of an impact if God would do something. Well, God's done a lot. And we're still waiting. And maybe we're not that different in that we have more than we have more of an abundance of what we need to change our communities than what we think.
Yes, go ahead.
The 21st century way to look at this is narratives. I think it's probably maybe wrong for us to retroactively apply that, although I think it does kind of fit, that the apostles didn't get it because it didn't fit a narrative that they thought they were in. It makes sense to us, and we sort of look at the apostles and we're like, how could you not see this? Because we know the end of the story. We know what the arc is. But when you're in the ark, do you know that you're in that ark? You know, the Syrophoenician woman didn't have a narrative to put on Jesus other than that he could heal the sick and the things that, and drive out demons and the things that he said were good. You know, the people that wanted
usually we found the religious leaders being the one that wanted to see the signs. And of course, that was a test. It was a test. Right after the feeding of the 5,000, and he sent the apostles across, why did he vacate the crowd? Why did he get away from the crowd? Why did he leave the crowd? He perceived something. What was it? Do you remember?
Was it they're only here for the food?
Well, yeah, that could be one of them. But what I
talks
was
about that
basically
later.
shooting for.
But Jesus perceives something in the crowd, and he sends the disciples away. What did he perceive?
What did he perceive? The first year, he was a
line.
novelty. The second year, he's gaining crowds. They know who he is. They're following him in mass. And then he performs this huge event. They what?
They're going to take him by force if necessary and make him king.
Okay, that was it. Thank you.
Going to take him by force and make him
The king. It's all moving in a momentum toward that in their minds. He comes on the scene. People recognize the teaching he's doing. They're seeing the different miracles he's performing. He's gathering troops the second year, and now the start of the third year, they're saying, well, we're just about here. Let's just get this. He's a little timid, maybe a little humble. Let's just get a hold of him and force him to be king, and then.
Well, if there were 5,000 men there, that's about 4 legions.
Yeah.
So that would be enough to start the process.
And we don't have to worry about logistics. He can feed us on nothing.
Just, yeah. No worry about provisions or anything. Just we'll make him king. Of course, he realized this, and he got away from it to avoid that from happening. When they move on and they start talking about the bread of life, and he explains what he is, that he is the bread of life, and then he goes in to give the explanation of the body, the blood, what it represents, and he gets into that entire dissertation where he's explaining it to them. How did they take it? What was their conclusion at the end of that period of time after he talked with them about that? I can't hear what Ben said. What did he say? How did the people respond? The disciples. I'm sorry, good question. How did the disciples respond?
The disciples stayed, everybody else left.
Okay. The other followers, how did they respond?
They left.
He started talking real. He started getting real. People were like, oh, this is too real. I'm leaving.
What do you mean I have to eat your flesh and drink your blood? That's this is a hard saying. Who can do this? Who can
Very
handle
hard
this?
saying, yeah.
Which
He'd been moving along, talking about the kingdom of God, teaching along these lines of what is expected of those that are in the kingdom, but then he hits them with this, the blood and the flesh. And they said, what? It's too hard of a teaching. And they turned their back and walked away. Now, we don't know how many, but it was probably a pretty good sized group. All of a sudden, this is too much for them. Yes?
Well, not only that, wouldn't it be perceived, if they're taking it super literally, wouldn't that be perceived as heretical from like an Old Testament law perspective? Because there's all the laws of blood and not eating people. So from their perspective, what he was saying is that's terrible. You can't do that. Clearly, in the same kind of way that we would read in the letters, and they're talking about managing false prophets. And it's like, well, if it says something that's against what you know is right, then it must be wrong. And so from their perspective, it's like, oh, well, he's saying to eat people. All right, write him off. But that's because of a misinterpretation.
yeah.
I didn't hear that.
Anyway, what he was saying is the Old Testament, there's prohibitions against drinking blood,
Right.
eating blood, and here he's talking about doing this. Well, so he's now talking openly about violating the old covenant. So, if I may, in the last few minutes, I want to run on to the second big overarching thing that I saw, which is what we've been dancing around all evening, is who is this? Because you've got Peter's confession there. You know, you are the Christ, but then they don't understand that. And he continually tells them, okay, he starts at that point saying, this is what being the Christ means. I'm going to be rejected, I'm going to suffer, I'm going to die, and I'm going to be raised. And we look at that and go, yeah. And they looked at it and went, what?
Their reply is, he's the son of Joseph and Mary, and here are her brothers, and here's the sisters. He's been here all along.
Yeah. Nazareth says,
Nazareth,
nope. You can't be the Messiah because I've known you your whole life. You know, I remember you running around with the other kids. And besides that, you're from Nazareth. You're not from Bethlehem, which is where the Messiah is going to come from. You've got Herod looking for Jesus and going, well, this is John. I beheaded John the Baptist, but now he's risen from the dead. You know, that's why he can do all these miraculous things. Others, he's Elijah or one of the prophets. We talked about the crowd wanting to make him king. The 12 in the boat, it's a ghost. Real quickly, tell me what happens on the Mount of Transfiguration. God does confirm who he is. This is my son. Okay? Who is there with Jesus when he's transfigured? Moses and Elijah. The law and the prophets. Mm-hmm. What did Moses and Elijah, according to Luke, talk to Jesus about? What was the topic of their discussion? His upcoming exodus is the word. His upcoming departure. Okay? What do Moses and Elijah, if we're talking about the physical suffering of his rejection and his death, what do Moses and Elijah know about that? Moses was 120 years old and felt like a 40-year-old. I'm 68. I would love to feel 40 again. It would be wonderful. He did not know physical suffering, is my point. Neither did Elijah. Elijah actually didn't even die. The chariots of Israel came and took him straight to heaven. What do Moses and Elijah know about leaving that could have been bothering Jesus? And you guys have already touched on it this morning.
Rejection. They both were rejected in some ways.
Some rejection, yeah.
Right. And Elijah felt so overpowered, overwhelmed by the enemy that he was extremely depressed.
And said, I'm the only one left. Yeah.
So he's feeling, they know what he may feel like
Mm-hmm.
in the next few months or year.
And yet, when he felt that rejection, what did God tell him to do? What did God tell him when he felt that rejection and he was down at the mountain?
I've got 7,000.
One, you're not the only one.
Right.
And you need to go appoint this guy king and then this guy as
Leaders, right.
prophet
Right.
to follow after you.
Right.
Succession. Even though Elijah did not know there was anybody qualified to come along after him. What about Moses? Who followed Moses? Joshua. And what did everybody, God and the people and everybody, tell Joshua when he stepped into that role? We'll follow you. Be strong and courageous. Over and over again, be strong and courageous. I don't know if this is what it is, but it seems to me that what Moses and Elijah had in common with Jesus is, God the Father is about to take me out of this world, and the people behind me don't know what they're doing. And I think Moses and Elijah were there to tell Jesus, your Father has this. It'll be just fine. I didn't think it was going to work out either. But look what God can do with these people. And we only had one to follow us, and you've got 12. Well, 11. There is a lot there. But I think part of the theme that we read through this is, who is this man, and do we really understand what he is saying? And that's why I really want us as a body of people to go back and read this and look at this and say, what have I been missing all this time? Maybe I missed it because I wasn't at this stage of life or at this stage of maturity. Father, what do you want me to learn? Because it's a great message and an awesome story. Next week, we're going to be looking in the latter part of these Gospels, not finishing it up yet, but Matthew 19, Mark 10, good section in the middle of Luke, and then in the book of John. We're finally getting back to the book of John. Appreciate your comments, appreciate you being here. Kept you a couple of minutes over. Please go rescue the teachers. Thank you.